The Policy Development Committee meeting of Tuesday, May the 2nd, May the 6th, 2025. Attendance has been taken. Approval of the agenda. Any additions? Councillor Miller.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have one item under other business, and that would be flag raising policy.
Okay, anything else? With that, motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Councillor Bell, second by Councillor Pierce. All those in favor? Anybody got a pecuniary interest to declare at the appropriate time? Adoption of the minutes from the previous meeting of February 4th, 2025. Moved by Councillor Miller, seconder, Councillor Kyle. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Business arising from the minutes. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 9.2, the County of Brant Municipal Accommodation Study. I'm afraid Councillor Oakley isn't here, but I thought Councillor Oakley brought forward a motion to make sure that we didn't wait too long to receive the update on this study, and maybe Alison can enlighten us.
Alison.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we expect that's going to be coming to September policy. Mark Maxwell is helping me on that, and he's quite tied up with other projects right now. So we do expect September policy will be the date.
Thank you.
Thank you. Consent items to be approved. There are 7.1 to 5. Motion to approve. And then anybody want to pull one after that? Moved by Councillor Miller. Second by Councillor Calpine. Anything pulled, David?
Yeah, 711, please, Mr. Chair, and then a question on 714, the allocation policy.
Okay, you got the floor. Go ahead.
711?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask Mr. Chair, through you to staff, they said in the report there's money left over in the wayfinding strategy signage program. How much is left over?
You're going to get your answer right quickly.
Through the chair to Councillor Miller, there was approximately $120,000 left over, and then we'll be taking these signs out of that amount.
Okay, thank you, Susie. I would like to make an amendment, Mr. Chair, to this.
Go ahead.
Well, this is where I'm a little frustrated because I brought it up before. Susie, I don't have any more. Well,
no,
you can stay there if you want, but I don't have any more questions for you. We talked about the various villages, hamlets, settlements in the county that had signs prior to county amalgamation. There was a proposal priced at $30,000 to replace those signs with more appropriate signs. Right now, the only sign I care about, because the only one that's missing, is Mount Vernon. That is a settlement that predates the county by about 150 years. It predates Confederation. It'll be here long after the county is here. I guarantee that. So, Mr. Chair, I would like that sign replaced. I mean, I've heard from enough residents that are upset about that sign coming down, never being replaced. So it's a very simple amendment that the approximately $200 necessary to replace what was the existing sign be taken from that budget that's used for this one and replace the Mount Vernon sign. Seeing the seconder.
Second by Councillor Pierce. Alison, do you want to touch on?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I believe the resolution after that decision package was brought forward that as signs were identified, they would be replaced in alignment with that historic settlement area boundaries. So now you've brought this one up, so we can certainly look to replace that sign. We just wouldn't be doing it as all the settlement boundary areas as one project, but certainly as they're identified, we'll put it up so we can work on that Mount Vernon sign right away.
Any more discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment? All those in favor of the motion as amended? Carried. David, you had one more.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's a question for staff on 714, and that's the allocation policy. And I don't have to tell staff, because I think they're well aware that that can be a very hotly contested issue, allocation. So just to be clear, if there is conflict, the way we're going to resolve that conflicts is using the scoring matrix. And am I correct on that? And then if they still don't have satisfaction, is there another resolving mechanism for that?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Miller. That is correct. So currently, we do not have any tool to help resolve conflicts with allocation. It's been mostly on historical precedent. So we're hoping that this tool will provide some alternative criteria to help resolve conflict that keeps an emphasis on having local participants in our programs and in our facilities, as well as keeping in mind items such as historical, that they're not for profit, and other such items.
So supplemental question then through to Stephanie. A counselor gets a call, there's a group just so upset. It's upset. They didn't get the field, they didn't get the ice time they want. What would be our best approach to that? Just say, it is what it is. Let's talk to staff. What was the scoring matrix? What would you suggest?
It usually is sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Miller. It is usually a very large conversation with staff in the back end. So it goes through facility supervisors, our manager of parks and facilities, and if needed, director and GM level to look at all alternatives. Also discussing with groups alternative time requests to try and see if we can accommodate both to the best of our abilities. We've been going through that this current season of our fields and diamonds allocation actually this spring. So just very lengthy conversations with the groups to see if we can do our best to make sure that the fields are, or the space is being utilized to its maximum potential and workable within the parameters of that sport organization.
Yeah, conflicts will arise, just the nature of the beast, but okay, appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Councilor Pierce?
Thank you, Chair. Just a little further on that. So for the historical precedents, does that work just like hypothetically, if somebody is using a field that they are able to, potentially use the field before somebody who hasn't, or is it specific to a time frame as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Pierce. With the scoring matrix that we've developed, there'd be a higher points allocation for the longer historical use that group has had. So if they've been using it for 0 to 3 years, they have a lower point tally than a group that has been using it for 15 years plus.
And that goes for specific time frames, right?
Yes, and it's specific to the sport seasonal time frame and the specific time and allocation that's been historically booked year after year. If a group were to be requesting a new time that they haven't used in the past, that would be considered new time on top of any additional time in the past. We do state in the policy that that organizations are not guaranteed the same allocation from year to year. We take in all of our requests and we lay them all out and look and see what we can do to balance everything and ensure that everyone has an opportunity to use the facilities fairly.
Councilor McAlpine?
Kind of along the same lines, where we've had adult recreation groups that want to use hockey time, and they've got bumped in the last couple of years for youth teams because they've prioritized the youth, I guess, in the past. Is there a certain percentage that's set aside for adult teams
Through you, Mr.
in the prime times in the evenings where, because people work during the day, so they can't necessarily use it during the day or, at midnight, so.
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor McAlpine. We do not currently have any set specific times for adults and youth per se. Youth do come first in the allocation priorities because we do want youth to be serviced first in our community and engage in physical activity. And knowing that they require sometimes an earlier time slot than adults do to participate in their sports. We do try our best to give them reasonable times. In the past few years, we have seen, as the community has grown substantially, a higher enrollment in our sport organizations. So we're seeing larger growth and more demand for them in our facilities. We're working hopefully with those organizations that they need to start capping their enrollments until we complete allocation, and they can open it up and have additional enrollments if the space is available and providing, so that way they're not disappointed and not getting the full request that they're making. And hopefully we're not bumping adult groups into a time slot that's completely unreasonable.
So there is no way, though, that we can allocate even a small percentage for adults, because now I'm under the impression almost no adult teams can play at reasonable times. And I'm kind of under the impression through this new scoring system, it's going to remain that way.
Because youth are the priority, adult groups are prioritized later in that allocation. What each group considers reasonable is different. A lot of the adult groups do request times like 8 p.m., 9 p.m., which is still suitable times for our older youth groups, so the 16, 17, 18-year-olds. So it really just comes down to, as we go through that criteria, how we would allocate those spaces.
Yeah, I somewhat disagree. I think there should be some time set aside for adults. But
Councillor Cowell?
Thanks, Mr. Chair, through you. So I'm just wondering, we have lots of requests for facilities, which is a good problem to have. So how do you handle if you have an oversubscription for something? Is there a waiting list, and are we proactively, if a night opens up, are we proactively reaching out to those groups that are waiting, or how do we handle that piece?
Yep, through you, Chair, to Councillor Kyle. We do have an available space listing that we send out weekly to user groups that are already contract users. They do have to subscribe to that through us to receive it. If anyone new is inquiring, we always recommend that they sign up and receive that, and we update it as space is given back to the facility booking office. In terms of working together, we're hoping, and what we gathered through our meetings with our community groups, is trying to figure out a system where we can communicate with the groups that have allocation currently, and if one were to give back something last minute, we would offer it to those groups. We have had that in the past year or so when groups have folded and given back time, and we knew that allocation wasn't received to a certain group. We have offered it up to them. So we do try our best to keep in mind what allocations weren't received, and if something becomes available, prioritizing offering that to those groups.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. The survey that you report out on in our package had 158 responses.
Yes.
Do you have a sense of how many individuals use these facilities? Is this a 1% of the total, or is it 10% of the total?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Bell, I feel that would be a small percentage of the people who use the facilities. Currently, with our ICE facilities, they are very well utilized in the evening hours. A lot of groups want to use between 5 and 10 p.m. daily. This season, we saw a lot of our ICE facilities being used 10 to 11 and some even till 11:30. So it is a smaller percentage of what I'd say our usage is.
My concern is that if this represents a small percentage of the total number of users, it might be just a vocal minority as opposed to representing what the view of the majority is. And if you could let me have some data, it doesn't need to be tonight, but if you could let me have data about the number of individual users that use these facilities, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Seeing no more questions. So we can approve 7.12 to 7.15. All those in favor? Carried. No consent items to be received. Staff reports, 8.1. Introducing new project tracking resources for council. Need a motion to put it on the floor. Moved by Councilor McAlpine, second by Councilor House. Go ahead, lady.
So good evening, Mayor and members of council. Thank you for having Tiffany and I here tonight to present some new resources to help council with project tracking. So for the purpose of today's presentation, I wanted to provide just a quick overview about some of the work that's been done to date and some of the feedback that we've received from council, and then we'll spend the bulk of the time just introducing some of the new tools that have been created, and we'll close out by talking about next steps. So when we started this work, the main focal point was on creating a list of major projects with details to share with council. And the intention is, if we're providing this information, it keeps council informed and can support a transparent, accountable, and responsive kind of governance. And so to do this work, we started by developing our major project dashboard, which we're all familiar with now. This dashboard is updated by staff manually on a quarterly basis and is shared as a consent agenda item at Policy Development Committee meetings. Since we've launched that back in September of 2024, we've received some valuable feedback from council to help inform future tools and improvements to that. So one main piece of feedback is that council's interested in seeing more frequent updates on a broader range of projects, specifically those that are capital in nature or construction based that might evolve more quickly than something like a long-term strategic plan. We also heard the value of visualization, so using progress bars, colors, those types of things to give council a quick snapshot of the information when they're reviewing those dashboards. And we also heard the value of not only communicating with council, but also with the broader community on the status of these projects. So a little bit beyond the scope of this work, as we're specifically looking at resources for council, but definitely something that's on the mind of our marketing and communications team is continuing to bolster the communication on project status. And so to respond to some of this feedback, we've looked at some ways to work within existing processes that are happening across the county to provide more frequent updates to council and to share more information. And so today we're here to introduce two specific new tools. One is the council portal and one is the roads reconstruction dashboard. And all of these things kind of combine together to be a suite of kind of valuable informational resources for council. They're not intended to replace existing reports or briefing notes and all of those valuable ways that you receive information, but they're intended to be kind of supplementary resources where you can find additional project information. So the council portal specifically, the best way to describe it, it's really like a council-specific web page. So you will receive login information where you can log on and you'll see a list of different kind of resources available for council. Its intention is to be kind of this one-stop shop page where if you're looking for the major project dashboard, or if you're looking to find Engage Brant, or even the active applications map, it's all housed in one kind of consistent spot, so you can always go there to find that information. The second new tool in the kind of suite of tools is our roads reconstruction dashboard. So this dashboard is leveraging information that our infrastructure and asset management team is already tracking within our GIS tool and repackaging it into a kind of council-friendly informational resource or dashboard. So just quick synopsis, I know we're all familiar with the major project dashboard, but I did just want to highlight that a few changes have been made based on feedback that we've received from council. So we've added some yellow highlights in, so you'll notice if a project has been updated since the last iteration of the dashboard, it'll be highlighted in yellow. We've also added links to Engage Brant and project pages when they're available, and we've added a section at the bottom of the PDF report and also on the online report as well that shows when a project's been completed. Now the new tools, the shiny new tools, are the council portal and the road reconstruction. So this is just a screenshot of what you will see when you log into the council portal when you receive that information tomorrow. And here you can scroll through the list of resources included on the page, and then to access any of the resources, you can just click the icon and be redirected. As mentioned, it's intended to be kind of this one-stop shop of a bunch of different resources that you may want to access with project information. The second new tool is this road reconstruction dashboard. I recognize it's hard to see up here, but really it's a GIS-based tool that provides a map of different roads-based projects that are happening across the county. So the projects are divided. In the left-hand side, you'll see them sorted by capital projects, low-volume roads and bridges. They're sorted by project status underneath. And then even in the top right-hand corner, when you're on the tool, you can also select to view the projects by ward if that's of interest. So if you only want to look at the projects happening in your ward, you can use that ward filter on the top there to see the projects specifically impacting you. So the reason we started with roads specifically is that this data is already being tracked as part of internal processes. So it's not something new that staff have to report on. It's already something they're reporting on. And so we've, again, just repackaged that information into a more usable tool for council to access as they wish. In terms of next steps, all of these are really digital heavy. They're all kind of online resources for council to access. In future iterations, what we're looking to do is to create more static PDF printable reports that are pulling the information that's displayed here into something you can easily print off and review as well. So just wanted to flag that. Although we're really digital heavy for this iteration, there'll be more PDF and printable options moving forward. So in terms of next steps, as I've said time and time again, this is really a trial and error process. We're continuing to learn and grow and see what works best for council. So we really appreciate everybody's kind of commitment and feedback throughout this process. It helps us really create kind of strong solutions in the end. And Tiffany and I just wanted to share too, if members of council are interested in setting up more of a one-on-one conversation to review the tools in more detail, share feedback, we'd be happy to set up those meetings at a later date once you've had a chance to kind of check out the tools once you receive the login. So that's it for me. Happy to answer any questions.
Councilor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. This is wonderful. Thank you for all the work that's been put into this. I think this is exactly the type of centralized information spot that we've been looking for. Excuse me. My question is, how far away are we from a streamlined version of this that the public can access? Because because people are asking us all the time, you know, is West River Street going to be done before the big dig starts? And will the big dig be done before the roundabouts start at the north end? And we get those kind of questions all the time. And rather than me going to the dashboard to come up with all the details, I would love to be able to say, just the same way I send people to the Brant Safe Streets website now regarding street issues, I'd love to be able to say, here's where you can go to get how far away are we from that?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Howes. Now that we have the dashboard developed, and maybe Tiffany can provide more information from the technical side of things, but it's easy to tweak that existing dashboard to be more of a public-facing tool. And then from there, it would just be about embedding that dashboard onto the public website. So I would say we're fairly close if that's the direction we want to take.
So follow up through the chair to Allison. If this, do I need to make a motion that this is a direction that we need to take, or is it already assumed, or what's the procedure on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is already assumed, so that was always the direction we wanted to go. We wanted to make sure that the information was palatable and correct to council first, and that was the priority. But certainly, as Haley mentions, now that we have the template and assuming that's agreed upon, we can start to develop a public-facing version of that.
Councilor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Yeah, I think this is going to be fantastic. A couple of questions I have. Councillor Howes kind of stole my punch there, but as far as the public facing, my own opinion, but I don't think there should be any difference really in what we see to what the public sees. So I'm struggling with the fact of, you know, we're making this for council right now, and then, you know, I think you said the public is a little beyond the scope right now, we're just doing this for council updates. I'm trying to understand what would be different in what the public could see as to whether it be major projects or whatever in these portals that the public couldn't see. Has there been conversations on that?
Through the chair to Councillor Pierce, there's definitely been conversations about that. I think it's just what makes sense in terms of the delivery model for how the community wants to receive that information. And so there's opportunities to, so for example, maybe the major project dashboard, that, you know, laundry list of all the projects, that's not maybe as easy for the community to consume in that way. So maybe there's opportunities to leverage other platforms and things to communicate the same types of information using a different mechanism. In terms of the road reconstruction dashboard too, I don't think there's many changes that we would need to make that a public-facing resource. There might just be some information that we want to take off. For example, we have a section for projects that are under warranty. That might not be of interest to the community, so we could just remove that and clean it up for the public. So there's just a few kind of minor tweaks that could be made just to make it a little bit of an easier to use tool with maybe a little bit less data for the community. But other than that, I don't think there'd be many changes that would need to be made.
Okay, I appreciate that answer. I just think that those that are gonna want to know this information will have no problem going to the website and finding the information. So I think, you know, as I say, the information, and I always say, is if the information is there, we can show them how to get it. And I think that's the important part there. Again, I guess there's got to be some tweaks to it, but I don't think we're too far off on that, and you kind of said that, so that's great. My second question here, you stated that we want to look potentially at something more static, like a PDF or printable. I'm curious as to why we would want to do that with potentially how often these could change, which is kind of leading into my next one about the quarterly updates. I really want to push that to a little bit quicker updates, but we'll leave it at quarterly for now. As to, you know, we're trying to get people to go online and you know, not waste the paper and stuff like that. So I'm curious as to why we would want hard copies of this. Who would want hard copies of this besides Councillor House, maybe?
Through the chair to Councillor Pierce, I think it's just people like to receive information in different ways. Some people are comfortable, you know, going online and finding the dashboard and navigating it that way. Other people still prefer to print something off and to have it in their hands. So I think there's value in kind of having both models available from a kind of accessibility perspective and to make sure everybody can access the information as they see fit. So that's one reason why we're exploring having a more static kind of printout version that could be maybe provided monthly at admin and operations for this type of dashboard information.
Okay, you see, I think we just went to monthly updates there, so that's pretty good.
For certain things.
I appreciate that.
For certain things.
Thank you very much. No, like I say, I think this is going to be great, and the color coding and stuff like that is going to be, like you say, at a quick glance, we can just look at it. If something's changed or something's yellow, something's red, that type of thing, that's what we need to know, because those are the calls we get. So again, thank you for the work, and this is going to, I look forward to the finished product.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, I will say, I think in terms of the quarterly updates for the major project dashboard, I know I provided lots of maybe rationale in the report on why we're going to kind of stick with that, but just the nature of the projects, a lot of them are longer term in nature, so you might not see updates as, you know, you might be once a quarter that an update for a long-term plan and things like that. But some of those projects that are construction-based, infrastructure-based, we know there's more frequent updates, things are evolving more quickly, and so something like a monthly update with the road reconstruction dashboard makes a lot of sense.
Mr. Chair, just and something you touched on there. Specifically on the construction updates, I'm gonna go to the one where we had the construction down at the south end and they ran into an issue. Nobody knew they ran into an issue until, you know, quite some time later. And I think those are the type of ones, even if it is a quarterly update or something like that, if a project runs into an issue where it's stopped or halted or delayed, I think maybe if we could, focus on those ones to get as soon as we know, get it updated, put it red to something, that might even appease some people, but it's just the fact of, if we're gonna have this information here, it's gotta be as current as possible, right? And you're right, some projects are just gonna do their thing, they're gonna take months or whatever, but if something changes on that, then that kind of gives us the heads up, so when we get the call, we don't go, let me get back to you, type thing, right? So, thank you.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. I too like this a lot. Thank you very much for this. Always hesitate to ask you to do more, but I'm going to. I don't think it's a big thing. If I'm at home and I want to know something about, I'm going to choose the Gurney Sports Park because that's the one that pops up here. I would like to have a link in here that says, here's the report that went to council that approved this project. So it details the budget and it details the scope. And it also probably sets out any issues that we might have faced coming to that decision. Now, I know some of that will be contained in Engage Brand. So it may be a question of how you link this to Engage Brand. So it's not asking you to do more, it's just a question of putting some more informative links in there. Is that doable?
Yes, so through the chair to Councillor Bell, that's definitely doable. We added kind of the Engage Brand links or the project page links quite easily as hyperlinks, but we could definitely have a column in that says, reports to council and has the links that are associated with any sort of reports that went for that project. That's easy
great.
peasy.
I appreciate that. And the question on feedback. So I went through the latest version of the dashboard. I've got lots of little comments. Would you rather we sent them to you or to the individual department that owns the project?
Through the chair to Councillor Bell, I think if it's specific to the project or to the dashboard and how it functions, it makes sense to come to our corporate strategy team. If it's specific to the project itself, that would be best directed to the staff contact listed there.
Good, thank you.
Any more questions? Mr. Mayor, you got any questions? Seeing none. No more questions? Oh, sorry, let's go.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you, a little of Councillor Pierce and a little of Councillor Bell's comments. So with respect to the PDF, the static PDF, is that something that you would generate and upload, or is it something that if there was updates to the projects, would you run that, like some sort of system in the back? Like if I wanted to print out something about the Gurney Sports Park, I could say, print the most recent PDF, and it would pull up whatever the information is. Kind of like, I think it's the Internet Project does that. You do a search by your address, and then it pulls up whatever the status of the project is. So just wondering if it's something that we're manually uploading or whether it's something that'll be generated based on the information that's in the dashboard.
This is where I come in. Through the chair to Kyle, sorry, new to the council. Yes, we could do either of those options. So we can make a static report that's printed once a month, or we could do a workflow like you're saying that is the same as the internet. It just depends on more so what the user is going to want to do. But you're right, we've done both situations in the past and are open to doing both situations in both projects. Again, if that's something that you would like, you could click the project and print a report. Yeah.
Awesome. And then my other comment would be, I really love the way the portal is laid out. One thing that immediately popped to mind though, if we've got anything that's new in the county, so for example, right now the chicken bylaw, for example, it would be really nice to have some of those new things right on that portal where we could direct people to the web page, or we'd have easy at hand the information we need if people have questions. So that's just my one little piece of feedback.
Any more questions? Seeing none, my only comment is keep it simple. It's much more easier to handle. And this council is divided on who is tech savvy and who isn't. I think if you can keep it simple and it will work for everybody. Seeing no more questions, call the question. All in favor? Got a big smile, Counselor Pearson. 8.2, film policy update. There is a recommendation. Need a motion to approve. Get it on the floor. Moved by Counselor Bell, second by Counselor McAlpine. Discussion. Greg's online, I believe. No discussion? No questions? Call the question. All in favor? Carried. Eight point three, tree protection enhancement policy. There is a recommendation. Moved by Counselor Howes, seconder, Counselor Miller. Trent, you're on deck.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Do I need to go full screen here? That's okay. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Trent Myers, Forestry Supervisor here at the county, here to introduce the tree protection enhancement policy. Just want to start off by thanking staff that were involved in the creation of the technical tree guidelines, which is the governing document of this policy. It was a great collaborative effort to try to bring our county up to speed with industry standard. So the purpose of this policy is to, one, meet the requirements in the Municipal Act. The Municipal Act basically states that a county shall have policy to deal with vegetation. It's specifically preventative maintenance, pruning of trees, reactive responsive tree removals and things like that. So we wanted to create a policy that speaks to that. It's also to provide a clear and consistent framework for tree planting, preservation, maintenance, and enhancement. So that includes, before trees get planted, we look at the actual locations of the trees. We look at where trees are needed, where the gaps are. For preservation, we're looking at tree protection zones during infrastructure projects and development. Maintenance, that would be preventative pruning cycles and fertilization programs and enhancement. So again, looking where the gaps are and increasing our tree canopy coverage and the health of our urban forest. Support the transition from our current reactive system to more proactive care. Supports the county's growth as well as broader strategic and operational goals. So plans like the Climate Action Plan, this policy would definitely help us get some of the targets met within that plan. And really, at the end of it all, it really is to ensure that best management practices are followed. So when does this policy apply? It applies to all trees on county properties. So that would be our boulevard trees, cemetery trees, park trees, and trees on private property that is being developed. So that would be plans of subdivision, site plan, and then also could be building permits in the future, but right now it doesn't include that. It meets the definition of development, and development is defined in the policy and in the report, in the guidelines. What is exempt is trees regulated under the Good Forestry Practices bylaw, so that would be the bylaw that protects woodlands in the county. We have that bylaw that protects that woodland, and we have natural heritage policies. This is primarily to protect trees and enhance trees that are on municipal property and on property that is undergoing development outside of natural heritage features. It also exempts disease, hazardous, and nuisance trees. for obvious reasons, to prevent risk, and also to encourage the removal of invasive species. So we created this policy because of some emerging pressures that we're seeing in our department, in our county, especially expanding urban canopy from new subdivisions. We're seeing thousands of new trees planted every year, or hundreds of trees planted every year, and thousands over the decade because of new subdivisions, and we need a plan to maintain those trees. We're also planting a lot of trees because of strategic initiatives such as the Climate Action Plan and the official plan. And again, we need a plan to actually maintain these trees going forward. We were seeing increased development and infrastructure projects. Again, that might mean more trees, but it also means that trees are at risk from development. So that would be tree protection issues, trees getting built around without any protection, zones and root systems getting damaged, which can cause issues down the road. We're seeing higher expectations tied to climate action, naturalization, and policy initiatives, especially from our residents. Residents are expecting us to act on climate change and increasing our tree canopy. We're also seeing external consultants, contractors, and developers lacking clear guidance on tree-related requirements, which is really increasing our demand on our staff and on our resources. So we're looking at creating some consistency and providing a kind of a place for those people to go to get information. The outcomes of this policy, or what we hope the outcomes will be, is to increase efficiency and consistency. Policy will ensure that we have a framework to work with, which will increase consistency. So an example of that would be maintaining trees throughout the county. We have a consistent framework of what we do for tree pruning. We'll have clear guidelines on clearance requirements over roads, planting requirements in subdivisions, and that will increase our efficiencies for both contractors and staff. It'll bring our standards up to date, up to industry best practices, which is important, and will reduce risk. It'll support strategic goals and priorities such as the Climate Action Plan, and in the long term will reduce cost through proactive maintenance. Any asset that you maintain proactively, you'll increase the lifespan of that asset, and we'll be able to see a cost reduction long term. So we just wanted to provide some real world applications of where you as councillors may see this policy really help. This photo up on the screen shows property line stakes in comparison to where a tree is located. So as you can see, the tree at the far end is located pretty much on the property line. In the policy, trees that are 1% on county lands will be maintained as a county tree. And really what that does is it reduces ambiguity in decision making. So if it's 1% on our property, we're going to maintain it. It's going to be added to our proactive maintenance cycles. If it needs a removal, we'll remove it. That brings our county up to surrounding counties and municipality standards. And really it will reduce risk long term because we'll have more say and we'll be able to monitor trees through those preventative maintenance cycles. Another example we have is a sidewalk project. So this sidewalk project was done here in the county. It shows a tree's root system being completely removed on one side to make room for the sidewalk. This policy will recognize trees as green infrastructure. So it'll be reviewed at the design phase of projects and ensure that they're considered early in that design phase so we can either issue a removal order for the trees or a protection order for those trees. It'll outline the requirements for notifying residents as well for pending tree removals and have a planning process for removing those trees. This again will reduce risk and unplanned project costs and delays. And again, it really increases our professionalism in the county as we're doing projects. So this tree here, This tree here is a young tree that was planted not too long ago in a new subdivision. It goes to show how trees grow without maintenance. They get pretty wild. The policy introduces proper pruning cycles. It's a 7-year pruning cycle. It's kind of industry standard across many municipalities. This will reduce resident complaints and make sure there's no sightline issues. But it'll also ensure that trees reach full potential, which is really important. When we're investing in something, we can actually retain it long term. And the next slide really shows what happens when you don't maintain a tree. This photo shows a tree that failed onto a private residence, likely due to inadequate maintenance through its life cycle and an absence of a preventative maintenance program. We do a really good job here in the county with reactive. We take down a lot of hazard trees every year. We have an excellent hazard tree program right now, but we're starting to move now towards a preventative cycle. But you can see the resemblance of this tree and then going back to the tree before. This tree started out really nice and then started to grow wild, and this tree shows that same similarities. And having that preventative maintenance, that preventative pruning can prevent failures like this, which will reduce risk, but also increase the life cycle of those trees. Again, this is a really good example of how our policy will help us. This is a text message I got from a contractor that was doing some tree work on a county property. It emphasizes the value of having regular pruning cycles. The arborist made me aware of some rot up in the canopy of a very large tree that we could not see from the ground. If we didn't have regular pruning, and at the same time, as they're doing pruning, they're inspecting the tree and reporting back on any issues, we would never have seen this issue, which could have caused damage to property or put our residents at risk. So having those regular cycles are really important to reduce risk and again, to ensure the longevity of the tree. In this case, the tree was pruned and the life was extended by removing the hazard. So just some key takeaways for this policy. The policy applies to trees on municipal property and trees that are on private property undergoing development. This doesn't include private property that is just in a regular backyard. It's very much, it's either your property is going through development or it's going, or it's on a municipal property. Nothing is new here. It formalizes what we're already really doing. We're already moving towards preventative maintenance. We're already asking developers and consultants to submit arborist reports, and we have requirements already listed in other policies, but this is just a single place that we have all tree policy together. It incorporates industry best practices, which is really important as we're growing as a municipality, and it categorizes trees as green infrastructure, which will ensure that we're looking at trees as an asset early on in design processes. It helps support the transition to preventative maintenance, and it helps achieve strategic goals like our 30% canopy coverage by the year 2051, which it seems like we're close, but there's a lot to do, and we have to make sure we protect the large canopy we have. If we don't protect what we have, we're never going to reach those goals. One more slide, I believe. So just some consequences. If we don't have policy, really, it's just like any policy. It's just poor asset management. Trees are assets. They have an inherent risk. We got to manage it as an asset. They also have life cycles, and we want to make sure we're getting the best, best value out of our investment. If we don't have a policy, it'll also increase risk, liability, and cost if we're not looking at things proactively. There's going to be an inconsistency of protection of trees during development, which is, which isn't professional and also can increase risk, again, if some trees are protected properly and some are not, and also we're going to lose canopy that way. Lack of clarity for the public and lack of guidance for staff, consultants, and developers, and again, failure to meet strategic targets. So that's all I have in my presentation. Does anyone have, I'll pass it on to the chair.
Councilor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Trent. Thanks very much for this report, and it's good to see this being formalized. You said a couple minutes ago that trees are assets, and everyone agrees with that. Our residents agree with that, and I think most of us around this table get calls from residents who say the property across the road from their house is being developed for residential or commercial or industrial, whatever, and the developer just clear cut. They just wiped out 50 trees in the last 2 days. Can't we do anything about this? And there are genuine concerns about that come to us, and now we can send them all to you. But how do we take this document and as a reference to explain to the public what we can and can't do in terms of protecting those assets in these properties that are being developed? Do we have any teeth on that? And then the second part of that question, someone had sent me a Facebook message on this and said, isn't there a way for us to ask developers to utilize existing trees within their site plans? You know, it's not always possible, but there would be times where it certainly could be possible, because we know that from the developer's point of view, it's always easier to just look at a clean slate. So it's just like a blank sheet of paper and they can start building. But so can you talk to some of these issues a little bit for us so that we can better respond to the residents and show them how we are trying to build a policy towards protecting those assets?
Yeah, through the chair, great, thanks for the question. The first part of your question about protecting trees and kind of on private property, and how can you use the document, the guidelines and the policy? You know, it is a balance. You know, we are developing, there's a lot of development in the county. We have compensation. If it's in a natural heritage feature, that's a whole different process. So if it's a forest and the forest is being slated for removal, our new OP is quite strong and our natural heritage policies are quite strong. But using this document, trees on private property going through development, unfortunately really aren't protected, but they are going to be compensated for. So it's going to be a size-based compensation rate. It used to be a 2-to-1, so you take down one tree, you have to plant 2. Now it's going to be, you know, if you take down a 50-centimeter tree, it's going to be 5 replacements, or you have to pay the cash in lieu fee for that. So that's a big increase, but it really will help protect the larger trees in our county, which is giving us the greater benefits. So I guess, you know, really answering your constituents, they may not be completely happy that we can't stop them. We don't have a private tree bylaw in the county, but at least there are policies where we can get some compensation and proper protection for the ones that are retained. Moving on to the developing around existing trees, I think that's quite important. Again, if there's a natural heritage feature in the property, a wetland or a woodland, that would be built around. We don't have a policy that says that you have to protect trees within developments currently. However, we are starting to see, because of the increased compensation rates, we're starting to see developers take a different approach and say, okay, there's a big oak tree on a development site, let's put that in the park block. And then we have a nice big oak tree already there, a shade tree, for the residents in that park block. So I think because of the increased compensation requirements for developers, you're going to start to see more retention for those trees. Instead of just being a 2-to-1 ratio for whether it's a 10-centimeter tree, which is like this, or a 100-centimeter tree being the same, you're going to start to see the larger trees be retained more often because of the increased compensation rates. That's what I think. We also are going to be looking at some other design guidelines down the roads that might help that. The climate action plan is one document that we can utilize for making sure we're prioritizing the retention of those large canopy trees. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Follow up, if that's okay, Mr. Chair. Thanks. That was a really understandable answer, and I appreciated it. So when somebody sees the developer clear cutting 50 trees on it, we can tell them that the county has put in place basically an incentive or a penalty, depending on how you look at it, that they have to either replant similar trees somewhere on the property, or they're gonna pay a penalty to the county. Now, if they pay a penalty to the county because they're not building more trees, do those funds go towards trees being planted somewhere else in the county?
Yeah, so all compensation fees from from developers or landowners that are going through development and have to pay compensation goes to our tree replacement fund. That tree replacement fund is there for planting trees in the county. So that's boulevard trees, park trees, cemetery trees. It could be used anywhere within the county. We're going to be using those funds probably to look at areas that are under, have basically low canopy coverage first, and then we'll work our way around the county after that. As development goes down, though, we are going to start to see a reduction in those fees. But yeah, any funds that we get for tree compensation is for the replanting of trees.
Great. Thank you.
Councilor Chambers.
Just a couple clarifications on developers and development. We all picture developers as companies building houses, but according to your definition, a developer could be a farmer that wants to build a milk house next to his barn, which is in conflict with a maple tree, for example. Is he a developer that is subject to all these regulations?
Through the chair, it depends on the process so if it's a building permit, I guess that would be what you're.
Sometimes farmers don't have to have building permits on certain buildings. It's, they're building a barn.
So if it doesn't have a building permit, and if it doesn't have a permit that is basically going through our planning processes, then it wouldn't be subject to any compensation. Unless there is a natural heritage feature in that area, then it would go through our good forestry practices bylaw, and that would be a separate process altogether.
But I guess the gist of what I'm trying to clarify is that farmers can be classified as developers and subject to this particular policy then?
Yes, absolutely. They could be, depending on what they're building, what processes they're going through. Currently, we are not doing compensation for minor consents or minor variances. So that's actually important to note. It really is just currently, as development is defined in that policy, it's for, it's going to be for your plan to subdivisions, your site plan applications, more of the larger developments. Yep.
And one more question, if I might, Mr. Chairman. This 1% rule on road allowances, et cetera. I'm just wondering if a farmer has a couple big old dead maple trees in front of his property that is maybe in the road allowance, then it's the county's responsibility to come and cut them things down?
Through the chair, if it's 1% on county property, yes, it's going to be under the responsibility of the county. That's what the policy states.
Now, I have a tape measure. We'll come out and we'll take a look at those.
Any more questions? Councilor Kyle.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to Trent. I really appreciate you describing the trees as green infrastructure and assets. I think that's fantastic. I have a question as far as damaged trees and remediation thereof. A couple of months ago, we did have some residents who had some questions around what I think it was called kind of like a bandage on a tree that was damaged by I think it was a car accident. So can you speak to where that fits into this policy? I didn't see it noted specifically, but I know it was also kind of a new thing they were trying out and wondered if you could maybe speak a bit more to that.
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, you're right, you won't see this in the policy. It was very much I guess, an experiment, if you will. Other municipalities, Burlington is a big proponent of that method of healing trees or kind of starting the healing process of trees for car accidents around trees or kind of car strikes. Time will tell if it is really effective or not. So we're not adopting it as a regular practice currently.
Through the chair, I just want to add to the question from Councillor Kyle. So how it applies to the policy is that that particular tree is a county tree. That particular pilot project that we've used and signed for the public so they'd be aware of it is us trying to come up with best practices on maintaining our canopy. So it does apply, but it's really to do on the maintenance side of things.
Councilor McAlpine.
So I'm just wondering, sort of along the lines of Councillor Chambers, I think like a farmer, for instance, they're allowed to cut a certain percentage of cordwood per year for fire and stuff like that. And likewise, I think a homeowner is allowed to cut down a few trees per year sort of thing. Is that still going to be the basis going forward? Because that would solve his problem.
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct. So our good forestry practices bylaw allows for the definition is for personal use. Yeah. You are allowed to cut a certain amount of trees or through in your woodlot or on your property without any permit or anything like that. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, just want to confirm that.
Councilor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Trent. Trent, we have lots of new developments in the county, particularly in Paris. Many of them have road allowances. Are we silent on what you can do in a road allowance? Or do people need to come and seek permission to put a tree in road allowance? And if they do, does the county then assume responsibility for that tree?
Yeah, through the chair, I can't speak directly on what you can and can't do in a road allowance. I'm not, that would definitely be our operations team. But I do know that if you want to plant a tree on county property, I guess that's kind of what you're getting at. We don't allow residents to just go ahead and plant a tree anywhere. You don't know where underground infrastructure is, and we also want to make sure that the right stock is getting planted and the right tree is getting planted in the right place. Under hydro lines, that could be an issue and things like that. So there is a process, and there will be a larger process in the future of requesting a tree for the right-of-way. There is a process now you can call in. I know rural landowners in the past have had trees planted for living snow fence projects and things like that. But currently, yeah, if a resident wants to plant a tree on county land, they have to go through us, through our suppliers, through our contractors or staff to do that.
Okay, second question if I may. In your report, you've got the technical tree guidelines. How do they relate to the policy? And again, do the technical tree guidelines only apply to trees on county-owned property or trees on private sites being developed?
Yeah, through the chair, the technical tree guidelines are really the governing document for the policy. So the policy states all matters should refer to the technical tree guidelines. The technical tree guidelines really are the meat and potatoes of the policy. So, if a developer wants to know how to write an arborist report, it goes, what's the county requirements for an arborist report? It's in the technical tree guidelines. it has our maintenance requirements and clearance requirements. So really, the technical information is in the guidelines, and the requirements that you'll have to go to the technical information to kind of figure out how to do it is in the policy. So the policy will state trees must be maintained as to best practices, or simply put, and then they'll have to go to the guidelines to figure out what that means, who can work on trees, who's a qualified person, things like that.
But again, they don't apply to private lots.
That's correct, yeah, they don't, unless they're undergoing development.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Trent. Trent, if I call you Clayton by accident, I apologize. Two questions. The first one is, this tree canopy, I never quite understood it, but I guess we're shooting for 30%. But it sounds like it's just, when you're looking overhead at the county, we're just looking at the settlement areas, is that correct?
Through the chair, the 30% that's going to be countywide. So we did our canopy assessment, 26% that we got was a countywide assessment. It wasn't just settlement areas. Yeah, so.
Okay,
Yep.
so I'm reading, it says the county aims to achieve and maintain a minimal tree canopy cover of 30% on all developed and developing lands, but you're saying that's the entire geographic area of the county?
Yeah.
Including the fields, the roads, the railways, buildings, the parking lots, everything?
Through the chair, that's correct. We utilize the, and perhaps our climate action plan person could speak to that more, but from my understanding is it is countywide, because we did use the county as a whole to measure tree canopy coverage. So, yeah.
Phil.
Through the chair, just to add, so, I mean, the 30% on the developed properties would get us to our 30%, and then the additional work that we're doing, whether it's tree planting initiatives and through our partnering programs, eventually that's where we'll push ourselves to the 30%. So we're trying to make up 4%, but making sure the developers hit the 30 as a minimum. And if we can get more out of them, we will.
Okay, I know 4% doesn't sound a lot, but I think it might be a little tough to get there, but you have to have a goal. And then my second to last question, we've just been through a provincial election. We've been through a federal election. And one of the themes, obviously, is more houses, more houses, more houses. And if you listen to these guys talk during the election, 90% of the problem is with municipalities and red tape. This is the rhetoric coming out. I wonder, is this seen as more red tape for developers? And did you talk to the development community at all when you were coming up with this policy?
Through the chair, really, I think it's really important to make sure that development community understands that we're actually not changing anything here. We're really just formalizing it into one policy. We haven't increased, other than the size-based compensation. That was actually in the 2023 official plan as a recommendation, so we're adopting this policy here. And they obviously developers were able to review that and comment on that. We're not adding anything here, we're formalizing it. And really that's it, so, yeah.
Any carve-outs in developments? And I'll give you an example, affordable housing, a public building, a library, any carve-outs at this point?
So through the mayor, you mean carve-outs, you mean like exemptions?
Yeah.
So I guess we could work on that on a case by case. The policy does state that the general manager does have discretion or for certain parts of this policy. So the general manager would be able to make a call on that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Just one question in regards to either, for the developers and such, either replanting the trees or compensation. So my question is, if we're trying to hit the 30%, is it not, I'll say, a quicker route to have them, for example, you stated like a 50-centimeter tree would be like 5 trees they have to plant. So would it not allow us to reach that goal quicker by getting rid of the compensation part of it and say, no, if you cut down that tree, you have to plant the 5 trees? And part B of that is the compensation, like, how does that balance out? Like, if you were to go out and buy 5 trees, how much does that cost as opposed to what they would have to pay as a penalty?
Through the chair, to answer your first question, the amount in our fees and charges bylaw, I think it's $523 per tree required to be planted is the fee per tree. So it would be 523 in your example times 5. That cost is an average cost of what we would pay a contractor to plant a tree. So it would be, so if we get that compensation money from the developer, we'd be able to use that money and put it right back into a caliper stock tree into one of our parks or boulevards or one of our county properties. So yeah, I guess your first question is, wouldn't it be easier just to have the developer just retain the trees or plant the trees themselves? Yes, it would be easier, especially for us, but often the developer just doesn't have room on that development site to plant potentially hundreds and hundreds of trees. They're already required to plant trees, 1 tree per lot in a subdivision. That is outside of the compensation requirement. So that's a development requirement. That doesn't count towards the compensation. That's additional requirement from the county. So after subdivision is built or industrial yard is built, they're required to meet 30% canopy coverage on that site or try to reach it. And then anything that they have removed goes into our compensation fund, and then we replant the trees elsewhere. We do allow replanting though, and if there's room for the developer or whoever to replant, then they can go ahead and replant. We encourage that for sure.
Okay, and just to follow up, so with the replanting, do they just say, I'm going to plant this kind of tree or that kind of tree, or is there guidelines to say it's got to be one of these?
Through the chair, there is in the technical tree guidelines in the appendices a County of Brant approved species list.
Okay.
That's the list that we will be using to ensure that the right trees are planted in the right place. It goes into the size of the tree. It even has an allergy rating on there as well. So certain trees have a higher allergy rating. So we may not want to use certain trees in subdivisions, and there's certain requirements, height requirements under power lines, things like that. Right. There's also a list of trees not to plant. So restricted trees, those would be your trees that are invasive or noxious that we wouldn't allow to be planted in subdivisions. So they would have to follow our guidelines, species guidelines, and also planting guidelines outlined in the technical tree guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Carried. 8.4, long-term financial plan, implementation on tariff impacts. There is a recommendation. Moved by Councillor Miller, second by Councillor Bell.
Good evening, through the chair. Presenting our report on the next update on the long-term financial plan. When we started this down the road with working with Watson's in 2023, we were just trying to come together with all our funding commitments, our financial studies, and see how they're going to intersect into our financial outlook. After that, in 2023, we provided you with a snapshot of where we were at and worked through 2024 to refine the model and finalize the inputs for the model that we presented in January. But that's only part of the long-term financial plan. So in order to come to a fully functioning plan, the next thing we need to do is develop the policies, procedures, and work on how it will serve council and support your deliberations on major projects and spending for the future. So 2 key foundation principles that we are putting forward today deal with intentionality and accountability. Been through a few rounds of budgets and my first set of financial studies as general manager. And what we're looking at proposing is a long-term financial plan annual review. So every year we would look at changing conditions, testing the assumptions we made in previous versions of the report, and looking at updated capital cost, inflation, all those factors. At the same time, we would vet major new spending requests well in advance of the budget process, so that council, with our guidance and support, could look at scheduling projects from major plans and studies into certain years in the forecast in an intentional and deliberate manner. Part of that is because of the scale and complexity of municipal finances. When we are asked to look at one specific project or one specific input in isolation, it's really hard to show that it moves the needle on the long-term plan at all, because any little input, it doesn't really make a change in the model. But if we look at all the inputs from an entire year and then look at what that will do to our plan, it gives us a chance to, okay, we're going to move this to different years, or certain projects may get shelved. It just gives us more of a bigger term, one time to look at things. In terms of accountability, once we go through a few iterations of this annual review, not expecting we are in any way going to get it right the first couple times, but working towards improvements, and it becomes a standard process, there should be minimal surprises and changes between when we do our review of the long-term plan and the budget that gets presented for council's consideration. Our forecasting should improve, both capital and operating, and then it should just be a matter of tweaking things when we get to the actual budget process. And as you'll hear in my next report, budget process is something we're going to have to be updating anyways because of the new strong mayor powers. So it's a good time. We're going to look at a lot of the budget pieces and bring something back forward in September that ties this in with those and presents a system for you guys to look at. As the long-term financial plan model and its policies undergo continuous improvements and updates, we're hoping the plan will evolve and provide you guys with a real strong tool. I think it's already a lot farther along than where we started, and provide staff and council with clear and plain language understanding of how municipal finances work, even though in the background it's got an incredibly complicated and interrelated system with it. So that's my presentation.
Any other questions? Councilor Bell.
Comment rather than
Go
question?
ahead.
Yeah. First of all, Heather, thank you, and thank you to the team. I realise it's a lot of work, and I keep bugging you about it, so I appreciate that you respond to it. The plan is less of a plan and more of a model in my mind, because we go through a planning exercise on an annual basis. It's essentially a budgeting exercise, but the model helps us make decisions, better decisions. And I think when we talked last, you said it's a really complicated model, and we have to, if we want to make if we want to test a set of changed assumptions, we actually have to send it back to Watson's to get them to do it. And I think in here you're talking about having a slimmed down version of the model, and I think that's a good thing to have, because I think there will be, my guess is that we're going to go through turbulent times, and we will be looking for answers quickly for example, if the effect of tariffs is to cause a delay in industrial development and as a consequence, a reduction in industrial assessment, and yet our spending profile is maintained, what's the impact on our finances, particularly on the debt that the county has to manage? So I do applaud that we're going to look for that slimmed down version. It is a worry to me, because when we talked about this, I think whenever we last talked about it, we had a forecast of 13% property tax increase for next year. And that worries me a lot. And the one thing we can do with the tool now, I think, is to say, what are the things we can do to moderate that, mitigate it? And I would like that we see some of that early, because some of it might be uncomfortable. It might be that we have to, for the first time in living memory, reduce services if we actually are to bring the property tax increase into a reasonable level. So I would not like to wait until we just get before the budget. I'd rather we see something ahead of that time where you play some what-ifs. So what if we don't get that increase in industrial assessment? What if we reduce services by, I don't know, I'll say 10%, just to throw a number out. How does the needle move on property tax and property tax increases?
Councillor Miller.
Yeah, a couple things. No real questions. I really like this report. I think it's very important. So I want to give kudos to staff because this is needed. And I thought they did a great job. There's a couple things in here I like. The fact that you're going to review the long-term financial plan annually. When we was first presented, it was the very day after. Andrea and I were talking on the phone, and we identified a capital project that wasn't included. And if that was put in, you know, obviously, you say it would change the numbers a little bit. One doesn't change it a lot, you say, but overall it changes. What I like is the integration of the action items. You talk, the statement there is the guiding principle of the integration policy is that while master strategic plans may be approved by council in principle as an overall direction, the specific action items and related budget impacts would be referred to the annual long-term financial plan review. So what I see that doing is we approve a lot of things. Sometimes we have pie-in-the-sky ideas, but to me, it seems like it's putting some financial guardrails on some of our decisions. That's how I see it. And I also think it's timely in the fact that we may be going into a bit of a slowdown. They talked about this at OSUM. For example, housing. A lot of houses are sitting on the market and stuff because people are afraid to commit. So I think it's very timely. It's a process, and but I think this is a fantastic next step. So very happy to support it.
Councillor Chambers.
Yeah, I think it's a great report as well, and I think the financial plan is a great report. What my concern is, and I really don't understand it yet, but Councillor Bell and both Councillor Miller are talking about the council doing all the budget stuff, but the Strong Mayor's Powers Act really throws a wrench into that in terms of what council does and what we plan and what, because the act says the mayor shall prepare a proposed budget. So council, and I don't really have a problem with that, but I think there's going to be a process that we're going to have to get used to in that the mayor should bone up on this kind of stuff real quick because he has to present the budget. And we sit here waiting for the budget to be presented, knowing all this stuff, but not being really able to do a hell of a lot about it because the mayor's budget comes and then we've got 30 days to make amendments to that. So all the council's good planning and all that is going to be a little bit of a paper exercise until we get the mayor's proposed budget. So that's the learning curve that we have to make, and how that's going to impact the budget in terms of, do we direct the mayor to bring back a 3% budget? No, he can direct staff to do that, but will he, won't he? Who knows? So I think the next discussion on the mayor's powers legislation as it relates to the municipal budget is going to be a very interesting discussion because that really has an impact of what we can and can't do with our own financial plan. And some of the, if you've been following in Hamilton, which I get the Hamilton paper, I follow in Hamilton quite a bit, their budget process was really weird in that some of the councillors proposed amendments and it was ruled out of order, and there's a real process. So as much as I like this report, as much as we have done our due diligence as a council to try to improve the financial situation of the county, the next budget is going to be an interesting exercise, is all I'm going to say at this point. And I know, I can see Mayor Bailey in his little square there, and it's an enormous responsibility, and I think we need to support the mayor incredibly throughout this process, because a lot of this is going to be falling on his shoulders, and a lot of the criticisms, a lot of the will fall on the mayor's shoulders. So it's a very onerous thing. So let's wait until we talk about the next report.
Any more comments, questions? All those in favor? Carried. 8.5, strong mayor's powers. Heather, you're on deck. All right, motion to approve, I get it on the table. Councillor Howes, second by Councillor Pierce.
I don't really have a presentation for this report. I've put all the information that I found. The letter came in on Thursday, so I adjusted the report to reflect that they are now in effect. But other than that, it's just for discussion and questions.
Who wants to be first? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment and following up from what Councillor Chambers said. On page 3 of the report, we talk about the municipal budget, and actually the mayor has an opt-out because if the mayor does not propose a budget by February the 1st, then the council shall prepare it. So I think we need, to have the conversation with the mayor about how he wants to move forward on this. My understanding to date of what the mayor understands is that he is not wishing to take on the full strong mayor's powers at the moment. He doesn't wish for us to formally say we reject them, and maybe the mayor can speak for himself, but my understanding is that he wants to continue the process that we have followed for budgeting. But I appreciate the clarity.
Allison?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and I want to emphasize I certainly don't want to speak for Mayor Bailey. However, the next steps would be for staff to meet with the mayor, discuss this legislation. It is new. It's new to all of us. And for Mayor Bailey to then decide, what he does and doesn't want to do. And then we have another report that comes back to council. And that could either be, as I believe Councillor Chambers mentioned before, maybe an education session where we can discuss this more as we dig into the legislation, or a deeper discussion after we've gone through all of this with Mayor Bailey and he's made his decisions, and I'm sure there'll be questions on both sides. So that would certainly be a next step. And again, I certainly don't want to speak for Mayor Bailey, but that would be an exercise that we'll be going through anyway, and then returning back to council with some further information.
Thank you, Allison. Mayor Bailey.
Hi.
Oh.
How are you? Through the chair to everyone who's still there. This is, I think I got a good indication as to what council thought of strong mayor's powers the other day. And I think that you got a very strong impression as to what I think of strong mayor's powers even before I got them. And I think that we will have talks together, hopefully as a council, but first of all, with staff. I see no need to do anything differently than we have been doing it. To say we should use some of the powers and not all of the powers is kind of ridiculous. I think that if we decide not to activate any of them, I think that the budget process stays the same. We would do a budget as we always did a budget, including the entire council, and if I have to bring it forward, or if I have to propose it, whatever has to happen. I mean, this is all brand new. It's only here tonight to be received as information. It is brand new. I've gone through it a few times. Some of it makes a lot of sense. Some of it makes no sense at all to me. And as you know, budget is not my forte, and I would certainly not ever pretend that it was. But I think through staff and then bringing it back to council is the way to do it. And I'm hoping that the transition from the last budget and this budget will hardly be noticeable. So That's all I can say right now without having a conversation with staff and find out how they want to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Comments, David?
The only thing I'd say about the budget, that's a double-edged sword, because if the mayor took it on as per the strong mayor powers, we have somebody to blame. And if he doesn't, well, then we share that responsibility. So, yeah, you kind of got to be careful what you wish for, so.
Any more comments, questions? All those to approve to receive this? No. Carried. Allison, Amo Commerce delegations, there's a recommendation? Somebody put on the floor? Councilor Kyle, Councilor McAlpine, Allison. Or Breyer, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the report is as presented. I'm just looking for a discussion right now.
Councilor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the list of proposed delegations, and the second one, which says Ministry of Health, funding for family health teams. There is currently an exercise being led by the provincial government to try to connect more people to family healthcare or primary care. And the family health team here, the primary care community family health team, of which I'm the chair, is actually submitting a bid requesting more funding. So I think this might just be premature, because if that succeeds, then that overcomes a lot of what I was looking to see from this particular delegation. So I would suggest we withdraw it.
Councilor Kyle?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. That's a good point, Councillor Bell. I think one that I believe we had discussed perhaps the last time we did have this list before us was potentially something with respect to infrastructure, specifically for the water and wastewater here in Paris. So I don't know if that's something that this council is interested in adding to the list, but I noticed that's not on this one, but we have talked about that in the past.
Allison.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councilor Kyle. I would also just want to point out to council that we have delegated on a lot of this at other conferences this year. So there may be some that we don't want to do again at AMO, or if it's a big priority, we do. But I just wanted to point that out, that we have delegated on these. Again, these were the subjects that got thrown out at the beginning of the year, but recognizing things change, and we did get some delegations earlier at other conferences, is the reason this is before you again, to digest, and if we want to change anything, we can.
Any more questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. 3 letters of communications, how do you want to deal with them? Councilor Pierce.
Move to receive, Mr. Chair.
Seconder. Councilor Bell, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Chief Administration Officer report, Allison.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to council. I believe I did introductions at the beginning of this meeting, but for everyone in the room, I'm very pleased to announce that David Meller has assumed the role of General Manager of Operations effective last Thursday, May the 1st. Dave is here tonight. Dave is a professional engineer who's originally from Paris, most recently served as the General Manager of Engineering for the City of Kenora. And he brings some really innovative and interesting infrastructure project experience. I'm hoping everyone has a chance to speak with him one-on-one over the coming weeks, and I'm sure you can learn a little bit more about that. I do want to point out that Rob Walton, who is also here tonight, is going to be with us until the end of June. He's going to help with some information transfer and to close off some projects and just generally assist with the transition. Although he is here until the end of June, I do want to take this opportunity publicly to thank Rob with respect and admiration for everything that he's done, and wish him all the very best in his upcoming retirement. Rob, I don't know if you want to say anything tonight, but no pressure. I just thought I would.
Through the chair, you gave me no warning this. Are you trying to make me cry or something here? Thank you for your kind words.
Thanks, Rob. And there will be more to come. We will be having a formal celebration, so it's not just tonight. There will be speeches. So I'm just going to move on to my regular update. Development services, the housing needs assessment and 4 units as of right zoning. The preliminary findings of the housing needs assessment were presented to council on April 15th. The public meetings will be scheduled for May and June, as mentioned, and they will incorporate public input. The zoning amendment to permit 4 units in Paris and St. George will be moving forward with a recommendation from staff and a public meeting on May 13th. For the official plan, staff are working on the conformity issues and updates with a plan to have a draft by June. For updates will include agricultural policy revisions, housing policies to connect with the housing study, and growth management policy revisions. The Cairnsville Master Plan, the consultants have been retained and the background work is underway. The Engage grant page will be launched soon, so keep an eye on that and to keep everyone up to date on where the project is and next steps. For strategic initiatives, the Director of Community Outreach position should be hired shortly, so we'll be happy to have them on board. The Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan update is due to Council for approval in June. The Wilkin Family Community Center fundraising campaign will be wrapped up shortly. And regarding the Paris Downtown Dig, ongoing communication and support for businesses is occurring. And the new construction liaison, Erica Holgate, has started in her new role. I think some of you have met her at the public consultation meetings. Corporate strategy, the climate action specialist posting is open with a closing deadline of May 12th. The Central Ontario Cooperative Housing Federation is finalizing the Class B cost estimates for Russell Heights Phase 2. And we'll be submitting the estimates along with the financing request to CMHC shortly. Grand River Street North between Mechanic and William, I'm sure all of you have seen this, but it will be closed Wednesday, May 12th as we begin the work on the downtown dig. Staff will be monitoring progress over the coming weeks and months to determine the impact from the delay that we've had from Enbridge. And we're hoping they can make up some of that work in 2025, but we'll know more once they get in and start that work. We're still working towards the October 31st deadline, whichever way we cut it in terms of delays. We are going to complete construction activities for the year and reopen for Christmas shopping season and Remembrance Day services. Navicon is going to be moving in tomorrow, and the road closure early morning Thursday, May 8th, and the excavation begins on the 12th. For emergency and protective services, the Backyard Hens program is now in effect. I'm sorry to bring this up, but residents must apply for and receive a backyard hen license for purchasing any hens. A new online application process is now available, and they can see that online. Enforcement Services has been busy with the launch and operation of the automated speed enforcement program. I think we're starting to see some feedback roll in from people who have been hit from that, so we will continue to report on that. Fire Services 2025 recruitment process is almost completed. We have 16 new recruits that will be selected by the end of June, and training will begin in September, and that will occur over 10 months. The new Chief Fire Prevention Officer, Michael Owen, started with us at the end of March, and that provides the division with full staffing in the Prevention and Education Services Division. The architect for North Paris Fire Station is working with staff on finalizing construction tender documents, and they plan to be released shortly. Tender result will come to council for review and approval, and the station is currently estimated for completion in the final quarter of 2026. Camp Phoenix, I think you're all familiar with that. A camp for girls interested in a career in fire is running again this July, with significant efforts underway by the volunteer firefighters to prepare for this year's cohort. A draft of the station location study for firefighter headquarters and airport stations is nearing completion, and the study is expected to be presented to council before the summer break. Paramedic services have recently onboarded 17 new part-time paramedics, 6 of whom have completed orientation training and are on the road. The other 11 paramedics are involved in orientation training and expected to be on the road in June. The new paramedic headquarters project is on schedule for phase 1 completion in July, and the administration will move in at that time or shortly out thereafter in August. And phase 2 construction for the new garage space, the garage space has initiated with completion July 2026. And this week, if you don't know, is Emergency Preparedness Week with a social media campaign developed in support of the provincial theme, which is Play for Every Season. Residents are encouraged to visit the county's website, emergency planning page for educational materials, and to enhance the community's emergency readiness. Community services. Special Olympics kickoff meeting was held on April 24th. Brant County will be hosting softball July 11th and 12th at the Green Lane Sports Complex. And more information on volunteers too will be coming out on that. So encourage anyone who's interested and hasn't already volunteered to get involved. The Brant Sports Complex expansion project, the preliminary concept and updated budget is to be presented at Admin and Ops this month. The Wilkin Family Community Center, the lawn bowling is to resume late this month, and the facility will open in June. Paris seniors will start using the center in July, and rentals for the public will begin in September. The grand opening date should be announced shortly. North of the NIF, the draft existing conditions summary report and guiding principles presented to community partners on April 9th, and the options exploration is underway now by the consultant. The Burford Skate Park, the grand opening is on June the 7th at 11:30 a.m. For ribbon cutting. And the Paris Skate Park expansion, the contractors are started back on site April 21st and expect the park to be completed by early June. The Watts Pond Trail Paris Phase 1 is currently under construction and expected to be open also in June. Arlington Meadows Subdivision Park, the construction tender is scheduled to be posted this month. Glen Morris Community Center, the review of engagement results with the resident committee is scheduled for May 14th. The Onondaga Ballpark renovation, the tender is being issued this month and work to commence this summer or early fall. The cricket field at Brant Onondaga Park will be open in June for games and practices. The Burford King Street Parkette, the design updates based on public feedback are underway. And the Oakland Community Center daycare renovations, the ministry approval was received in April and renovations are in progress. The community forestry strategy, community engagement, it's online currently, and community partner session is scheduled for May 15th. And facility bookings are now taking advanced bookings for 2 years out for standalone halls. I know that was a long update. Thank you for your patience. All the general managers are here, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
You care to repeat that?
I can give you a PDF.
PDF, okay. Any questions? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. Very comprehensive summary. One thing you didn't mention, the new hospital. Has there been any movement since the delegation we had at Roma, where Sylvia Jones seemed to be indicating that she would push things along with respect to considering a greenfield site?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Bell, it's great timing because I followed up on that today. My understanding is we're waiting for the budget to be presented, the provincial budget to be presented and approved for the next planning grant, and that's when it will actually define whether we're looking at a greenfield or redevelopment. So that is pending quite shortly. But that is the latest update I have, is that when that is put forward, that's when we'll know.
Any more questions for Alison? David?
The couple things on emergency, Allison, you mentioned Emergency Preparedness Week. I think that's something, I'd like to see more people take seriously, especially in light of all the power outages we've had from the ice storm, the windstorm. I've talked to people again at OSUM. They're out without hydro for 10 days, 11 days. It's like, back in the Stone Age. So I don't know. It's how you get through it. I guess you get through it. But yeah, I think that's something we should encourage residents to take part in. And then I want to ask about, because also one of your updates, you talk about emergency management. Will Kent Potterf be coming to council and talking to us about, usually does an annual report? Do we know?
Through the chair to Councillor Miller, I believe his report was presented a couple of months ago. He didn't come and do a presentation, but Cindy might.
Okay, what was the last one then?
Yeah, through the chair, there typically is a report that is done near year end, and that is on an annual basis, absolutely. If council is looking for some additional information beyond that, we can discuss that further, and perhaps he could come to council to provide some more information.
The question I actually have is usually they do, there's an exercise, an annual exercise, is there not? And I'm just wondering what have they picked the topic, the subject for this year?
Sorry. Through the chair to Councillor Miller, we don't know, and Kent does not tell us ahead of time. So I'm positive that I'm positive that he has selected an exercise for us.
Okay.
But unfortunately, we don't know what it is.
Okay. I'd love to throw out a suggestion, but maybe I can email Kent directly. But one of the suggestions was a cyber attack, because one will happen. We know that. And with the increased use of AI, it's going to be bad. And yeah, that's something I sat through and listened to. And it's just, like I say, it will happen. And once it does happen, it's going to shut everything down. And yeah. So, but I'll talk to Kent directly. So, okay, thank you.
Any more questions, Charles? Seeing none. Councillor Miller, new business.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just, I'm just trying to connect a couple dots here. And maybe somebody can connect them for me. It was at this committee, Policy Development, last year, where we approved a flag raising and penman lighting procedure, protocol. And in that protocol, we removed any religious events, a few other things, but I do remember religious was one of them. And a couple of weeks ago, we got an email from Council Assistant Pam inviting us to the raising of the flag for Khalsa Day. I don't have a problem with Khalsa Day, but it is a religious event, and I'm just wondering why that occurred. And maybe, again, maybe I'm missing something, but that's how I understand things.
Somebody want to handle it? Heather?
So when we get a request in for one of these, culture days are permitted. They get reviewed by the clerk first, and if she says, she's not sure if it falls in the policy or she believes it doesn't fall in the policy, then it's left to the mayor's discretion if he wants to do the flag raising. So there's nothing in the policy that says that the mayor can't do the flag raising. If he had said no, and then they could have come to council and asked council to make a decision on it. But that's the way the policy was written, that if the clerk doesn't believe it fits or is questioning its fit, it goes to the mayor for decision.
And if I read what it means, it does say it's a time of religious and cultural celebrations for Sikhs. So again, I see it as a religious festival, which, like I said, I don't have a problem with it, except it goes against their policy. But I don't know. I don't know how to explain it to people when we turn one down and another's approved. And I guess that's what I was looking for tonight, and I'm not getting it.
Thank you. Anything else? Councillor Kyle.
One quick one, Mr. Chair. Just to revisit the AMO delegations, I know we received it as information, but I think staff was looking for some direction on whether or not we wanted them to submit for this whole list. So I'm wondering if maybe we should take a quick relook at that. My suggestion is no, we don't need to submit all of those. So if there's appetite from council to look at that list, my thoughts would be maybe adding infrastructure to speak to the Paris water and wastewater, and then maybe the red tape reduction at Bishopsgate, since that's one we have not done yet this year. And if there was value in Ministry of Health again for the hospital, perhaps that one, but those would be my suggestions unless someone else has other thoughts on that list. But I personally don't think we need this whole list to be submitted.
Your thoughts? Councilor McAlpine.
So we still have the opportunity to add more to this. That's my understanding, right? The only reason I ask that is that we might want to look at increased funding for long-term care projects and for homes. That seems to be a hot issue in this area, so.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor McAlpine. So they just opened the request, so nothing has been submitted yet. So there's absolutely an opportunity we can submit for whatever council would like to. Once those are confirmed, it would come back to council notifying me that it's confirmed, and then we would find out who's going to attend the delegations and approve the briefing materials.
Okay, that was my understanding, so thank you for clarifying.
Any more thoughts? Councilor Chambers.
Just a comment on making delegations on things that we are joint service providers with the city. You have to be consistent with what the our partners are suggesting. So those kind of delegations, you have to be careful to be consistent with all partners.
Right on. Any more thoughts? David, sorry. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Miller. Councillor Miller, are you aware of any religious flag opportunities that we've turned down or missed?
Well, the only one I would point out was Christian Heritage Month, which I think was turned down under the auspices that it was a religious request.
That request had no real bones to it, though. It had nobody to stand behind that request, I don't think. I think it was just a backlash to every other religious flag that we had said yes to. No one really, it wasn't a United thing, it wasn't a Baptist thing, it wasn't it was just someone who threw it out there to see whether it would stick, I think. I'll go back and find out about that. If you know any of the history behind that request, I would certainly like to see it.
David?
I will say the only history I have is what you have, Mr. Mayor. It should be pointed out, there was a petition too for it, and I know Councillor Bell looked at the names and didn't recognize a lot of the names, but if you go back and you look at the petition, it's very interesting because they actually went to the people throughout the whole county. I seen a lot of names from Ward 4 and Ward 5. It was interesting. So, but as far as any special information, I have none. It was just all the information that we as we had at this council table.
Right. Did we actually turn it down, Councillor Miller?
Yes, we did.
Thank you.
Any more questions, comments?
I think Councillor Kyle still is looking for an answer to a question.
Well, I know I'm thinking the same thing, but everybody's kind of skirting the issue, so now's the time if you want to get your request in for a delegation. Don't wait till the last month. Councillor Miller.
I'm going to build on what Councillor McAlpine said. The province is imposing more and more levels of care for long-term care, right? 4 hours a day, blah, blah, blah. But they don't follow up with the money. So I think I really support that idea. And I don't know if through social services, but we've talked about it many, many times. people on ODSP, people on Ontario Works, they haven't had an increase in years. And we talk about housing needs and stuff like that, but I mean, I don't even know where you start when your monthly allotment is $700 and it hasn't gone up in, well, it's coming on 10 years now. So that's something I'd like to see us argue for. But again, as per Councillor Chambers, a good point. We can't forget, we partnered with the city on that one through social services. So two of the ones I support.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Miller. You're absolutely correct, and that's something that I spoke with Mary Musson at the city on. I'm not sure which earlier conference it was this year, but we did speak on that. And certainly, as with the hospital, we make sure that whatever we're presenting or delegating on is lockstep with the city if it's something that it's a joint responsibility or just even a joint interest. So we do compare notes and make sure that we're not at odds on that before we go forward.
Are you good?
So if there's nothing else to add, then my suggestion, can I make a motion that with the small handful, I'd move that we put in requests for the Ministry of Infrastructure in terms of the Paris Water and Wastewater, Ministry of Long-Term Care, provided we can have some discussion with the city to make sure that we're in line with that. And then the Ministry of Red Tape Reduction for Bishop's Gate. And then to Allison's point, if there's value in delegating on the new hospital again, provided we're in discussions with the city on that one, I would suggest those 4 for this time around. If
Are you making a motion?
Yep.
Seeking a seconder, and then I'll second by Councilor McAlpine. Allison, you want to comment?
Thank you, to you, Mr. Chair. Just a question for clarification. And also, and I'm blanking on the full name of this ministry, but for the Ontario Works funding allocation, I believe also.
Councilor Miller.
Yeah, the Ontario Works is absolutely important, and I know Councillor Oakley and I have talked about it a lot, so I would like to see that one. And I'll support the motion, knowing full well that it comes to council, and if we come up with anything in the meantime, we put our thinking caps on, we can always bring that up then.
Any more discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Next meeting will be September 2nd, 2025, and let's hope we can still raise our hands that night.
With our PDFs printed off.
Whatever.